Hello everyone, welcome back to my Python series. In this video, I will explain the inheritance of Python. It is very important in Python. Now I will explain inheritance in Python in a very simple way with real life examples as well as with the code. Let's start from basic. At first, I am explaining what is inheritance. Inheritance means one class can use the properties and methods of another class. There are five types of inheritance. They are single inheritance, multi-level inheritance, hierarchical inheritance, multiple inheritance, and at last, hybrid inheritance. Now I am explaining one by one. At first, I am opening the file for single inheritance. It is a simple code for single inheritance. By this simple code, we will understand what is single inheritance. Here at first, I wrote class parent. We know that the first letter of class is always in capital letter. That's why I wrote parent in the parent. The P is in capital letter. And between the class parent, I wrote one method named show. And between the show, there is one parameter that is self. And in method between a class, the reference, not the reference, the parameter self is always required. Here, self refers to the current object. And between the method show, I wrote the built-in function print for printing something, and between the print, this is parent class. And then I took another class that is child class, and between the parentheses I wrote parent. Actually, here the concept inheritance occurs. In this line, I inherit the methods from the base class that is parent class. That means here the class child inherits the methods from the base class that is parent class. Now between the class child, I wrote another method that is display, and similarly between the method display, I passed the parameter self. It is always required for a method between a class, and between the display method, similarly I used the print function to printing something, and it will print this is child class. Now I am coming to the next portion that is very important. Here I took an object named obj equal to child. It means here I am taking one object for the class child, and then I called the method show. Here I wrote obj.show. But looks over here. Here is no show method under the child class. But I can access the method show because here the class child inherits from the parent class. That's why the class child can access the methods under the class child as well as it can access the methods under the parent class because the class child inherits from the parent. That's why it can access both the class from itself as well as from the parent class. So it is very natural to access the class show from the parent. That's why it can access the method show and as well as it can access the method display because display is under the class child itself. Now I will run the program for better understanding. Look on the output screen. At first it shows this is parent class. Because at first I am calling the method show and show is under the parent class and it usually shows the message this is parent class. That's why it shows the message this is parent class. And similarly display is under the class child, and it will show the message this is child class. So it showing these two messages. Now I am coming to the next inheritance, that is the next type of inheritance, that is multi-level inheritance. Similarly here, at first I am taking one class, that is a grandparent. Between the class grandparent I took one method named house, and I know that we know that every class, when every class has method, the method need one parameter, that is self. Actually self indicates itself, and between the method house I took one function print, and between the print grandparents house. And now I am coming to the next class, that is class parent, and between the parenthesis grandparent. It means the class parent inherits from the class grandparent. That means what? That means the class parent can access the method between this class as well as from the grandparent class. So in this situation, the class parent can access the method car as well as the method house. Now between the method car, I wrote print parents car. Now I am coming to the next part, that is class child, and here the class child inherits from the parent class, that is this class. Usually it will inherit from the parent, that's why it can access the method under it as well as under the parent class. But here parent class inherits from the grandparent, so the class child can access the method from itself and the method from the parent class. Not only that, it also can access the method from the grandparent. So the class child can access the methods from the three classes. That is very interesting because it can access the method from itself and also from the parent class and also from the grandparent class. And now I am coming to the next part. Here I am taking one object for the class child, and here at first I am calling the method house. But looks over here, the method house is not under the child class, is not under the parent class, it is under the grandparent class. But previously I mentioned that the class child can access the methods from itself as well as from the parent and grandparent. That's why the method house can be accessed by the class child. So it is very normal because it is accessing the method from the grandparent. Then car, we can see that the method car is under the parent class. So it can access the method car from the parent class. And at last bike. Bike is under the class child, so it is under itself. Now for better understanding, let's run the program. Here at first it shows grandparents house because at first I called the method house, which is under the class grandparent, and usually it will print the grandparents house because here I wrote the function print between the parentheses grandparents house. So the first line comes from this, and now I am coming to the second line, that is parents car. It usually comes because here I wrote parents car, and in the second line I called the method car. That's why this line came. And at last I called the method bike. So it shows child's bike because this line executes. That's why this line printed on the output screen. Let's move to the next type of inheritance, that is hierarchical inheritance. At first, I took one class, that is person, and between the person class, I took one method, that is role, and similarly, I took the parameter, that is self, and between the method role, I took one function, that is print, and it prints I am a person. Now I am coming to the next class, that is student class, and here we understand that we can understand that it inherits from the person class because between the parentheses I wrote person. So in this situation, we can say that now the class student can access the method from itself as well as the methods from the person class because it inherits from the person. So in this point, it can access the method from itself as well as from the person class. Now I am coming to the next line, that is the next class, that is class teacher. It is very similar to this class because it also inherits from the person. We know that student is also a person. I am explaining in a real life example. We know that student is a person. Also, teacher is also a person. So here the teacher class inherits from the person just like the student class. And here I wrote one method that is teach because it is linked with the real life situation because teacher can teach and student should study. So here between the student I wrote the method study and between the teacher class I wrote the method teach. And between the study method here I wrote between the print function student studies. It is very natural because students should study. And between the teacher I wrote the method teach and we know that teacher can teach us. So I wrote this line teacher teaches. Now I am coming to the next portion that is making object. At first I wrote s equal to student then parenthesis means here s is one object of the class student and similarly t is the object of the class teacher. Now I am calling the method role just after dot after the s. So now the method role will execute. So it will print I am a person and then s dot study. It will usually print student studies and at last again t dot role. It means it will print I am a person. But looks over here, t is the object of teacher, but it can accessing the method from the person because it inherits from the class person. That's why it can access the methods from itself as well as from the base class. So it is simple. And now I am coming to the next part, t dot teach. Now I am calling the method teach, which is under the class teacher. Here I wrote print teacher teaches, so it usually prints teacher teaches. Okay, now I will run the program for better understanding. Now looks over on the output screen. At first it shows I am a person because at first I called the method role. That's why it prints. Then it shows student studies because I called the method study. And in the third line, we can see that I am a person because here I called the role. Similarly, at last it shows teacher teaches. Okay. Now I am coming to the next type of inheritance, that is multiple inheritance. At first, I took one class that is father, and between the class father, I took one method named skill1, and it is very normal because previously I already explained about the self parameter. So now I am not explaining the self again, and between the method skill1, here I am taking one function that is print, which is by default come in Python. And here between the print function, I wrote father's skill. Then I am coming to the next class that is mother. And between the class mother, I wrote one method that is skill2. Similarly, I passed the parameter self and here between the built-in function print, I wrote mother skill. And now looks over here, it is the vital area. Class child between the parentheses, father and mother. Actually, it is linked with the real life example because we know that child inherits from father and mother. Just it is same as the real example. Now I wrote one method between the class child one skill and similarly I passed the parameter self and between the built-in function print I passes the message child's own skill. Now I am creating one object of the class child Now I am accessing the method skill1 that is under the class father. Okay, so it is very simple because the class child can access the method skill1 which is under father because it inherits from the father as well as from the mother. So it can access the methods from itself and also from father and mother. So skill1 is under father, so it is accessible from the class child as well as skill2 from mother. It is similarly accessed by the object. It is accessed by the class child and at last one skill which is under the class child. So the three methods can be accessed by the class child. Now I will run the program for clarification. Look on the output screen. At first it shows father skill because at first I called the method skill1 which is under the class father. Usually it will print the statement father skill. That's why we can see the line father skill. Similarly, next I called the method skill2. That's why it shows the message mother skill. And at last I called the method own skill and which is under the class child itself. And usually it prints child's own skill. Okay. It, that is all about multiple inheritance. Now I am coming to the next type of inheritance. That is hybrid inheritance. It is the last type of inheritance and it is the fifth type of inheritance. At first, I am taking one class named A. Between the class A, I wrote one method named method A, and similarly I passed the parameter self, and here I used the built-in function print, and I am passing one statement class A, and now class B is inherited from the class A because between parentheses I wrote A. That's why it means that class B inherited from class A. Now I wrote one method named method B and similarly I passed the parameter self and between the method B I wrote the built-in function print and I wrote class B between the parentheses. Similarly, I took the next class named C and it inherits from A because between the parentheses I wrote A. Similarly, here I wrote one method C and similarly the self parameter and between the method C I wrote the built-in function print and passed the function. No, actually I passed the string that is class C and it is the vital area for understanding the hybrid inheritance. Looks over here class D and between the parentheses B and C. It means what? It means class D inherits from B as well as C. Again, B inherits from A. So we can say that class D can access the method from itself. It can access the methods from B and C as well as it can access the methods from A because at first the method from D it is very natural because it is very normal because the method is under D and B and C are the base class respect to the class D. So it is very natural for accessing the methods from B and C. And again, we can observe that B and C inherited from A. That's why we can say in a sentence that class D can access the methods from D, B, C, and at last A. And here I took one object of class D, and now I am calling the method A, then method B, then method C, then method D. So it usually prints class A, class B, class C, class D. Let's run the program. Looks over here on the output screen, it shows at first class A, then class B, then class C, and at last class D. That's all about inheritance in Python. Thanks for watching.